Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a discussion video talking about the Star Wars YA books that have come out in the canon. I have done book reviews for many of the books, especially the ones that have come out since like 2021-ish. I've also done a ranking video on all of them as that came out as of a few months ago. And so I've talked about them a little bit, and in a lot of my videos I find myself very critical. I am much more critical of the YA line of publishing than I am with the adult line, which is the adult novels from Del Rey and Random House Worlds. And I thought, what if, rather than just provide criticism, what if I provide a roadmap for what I would do that I think that will help the YA novels become better and become more impactful books, and as a more impactful line of books. Things I think that will overall enhance the experience. Some of these things are more like in the way that they're written and the way that they're focused and marketed. Some of it is like the formatting of the books that I think is just really bad. And then there's some things where I'm talking about the authors that I think that really work and that really connect, and then some authors that I think maybe don't connect as well, and themes that are discussed in the books, all that kind of stuff. So I have a little outline I'll go through. I have plotting problems, the general structure of the design of the books, and then the interconnectivity of the books, and then finally which writers to keep and or bring in. So let's start with my first point, which is the plotting problems I have. So many of these books are too standalone, too character-focused, too theme-focused, and not enough action and story is happening, and not enough bigger universe stuff is happening. For example, one of my favorite books, and one of the first YA books to come out, Ahsoka, I thought was a brilliant book. But it's so character-focused, and it's so small scale, and it's so not as big scope as I think it should be. And doing like one of these books and every once in a while is okay, and that was the problem that the canon almost ran into. The canon for Star Wars, for the adult novels, almost ran into being too character-focused. And for a few years we were wondering, are they ever going to get plot-focused? And they did, and the novels have gotten much more plot-focused. In the adult line, in the YA line, they just still generally haven't. And so that, I think, is one of the biggest issues that we have with the YA books currently. I also find that they're generally way too short. You're getting this story that can be read in a matter of 2 or 3 hours, sometimes 4 or 5 hours at most, where, many of these books are just 300 pages, but with larger print. When an adult novel is 300 pages with smaller print, it's also a physically larger book. Like if I pull out one of the adult novels, it's not just that the font size is larger. You can see the book itself. The adult book is a larger book, and so there's more story happening with it. And the YA books, they're just so super fast, and you're not getting too much depth in them. And at the same time, I recognize the YA books are made for a little bit of a younger audience, but I do believe that a significant portion of it is an adult audience, and I also believe that the younger audience could handle making them longer, making them more action-focused, making them bigger scope. One of the other problems I have with the books is that they are too focused in audience appeal. Generally, when you're doing publishing, you want to maximize your appeal, and not every book is going to appeal to everyone. That is impossible to do. But you generally want to get as much of the reading public as you can. For example, the adult books generally I've found work their best. Some of the best authors like Mike Chen and John Jackson Miller and several of them, I find that they try to get anyone who's just a fan of Star Wars to be able to enjoy their books. And I think that is the right approach to do it. So, of course, you have to go niche in some elements of it. You're already niche by being a tie-in books, because tie-in books don't sell as well. But the YA books, I have found to be very limiting in audience. They are not just Star Wars fans that they're appealing to. They're Star Wars fans of one specific gender that they are marketing the book to. There are people they're both men and women who read the books, but the marketing and the way the books are approached and designed are very heavily focused on attracting women readers. And it's good to attract women readers, but it feels, from my perspective, that they've kind of forced out a lot of the male readers. I know several people who just won't read, who are Star Wars readers, who just don't read the YA books anymore because of that. So I think that's part of the, and then also several of these books get very political, and so then you start getting, limiting audiences not just by gender, but also by political viewpoints, and then you start limiting it based off of your worldviews, and I just find that they're just too limiting as a whole. There's certain authors who do this worse than others, but I've seen this more in the YA line than I have the adult line. The adult lines, even when they get political, it doesn't feel like they're limiting audience in the same way. It feels like they're throwing something in, but it doesn't feel like it's the main thrust and focus of the book. And when it does, I don't think those books have done as particularly well with audiences. Now talking about the actual structure of the books. One of the biggest pet peeves I have in the books is that the YA books don't present a timeline, and I think that this actually hampers the YA books' sales abilities. One of the great things about one of the adult books that Del Rey does is they put a timeline in there that not only tells you of when the movies are, but they also, let me get to the timeline just one sec. They don't just show you when the movies are, but they also show you where the other books are that take place and when they take place. And they did this back in the EU as well with the Bantam and Del Rey books from back then. But when you have a timeline in the book, you understand not just this author's novels, but all the other novels that have been published in the line. It's good for getting more people to become collectors because it's easier for them to see that. And then also it's good for, I enjoyed this Star Wars book, where do I read next? If you have the timeline in the book, boom, you open it up, you see what's next to read. Instead, you have nothing in here. There's no timeline whatsoever in the YA books. And so because of that, you just kind of have to look harder. And I don't think that's best, especially if we're assuming it's a younger generation. They might not necessarily be as hooked. You need to have an easier way for them to be prepared for the next book. Maybe that's having like a sample chapter of the next YA book at the end of one. The adult novels have done that a lot. Yeah, sometimes in the paperbacks they'll put short stories, but in the full novels they'll often put in a snippet of a chapter of one of the other books that's coming out at the time, and that'll help you get more interested and be like, all right, the next one's going to have this in there. I know what to prepare for. And so I think that's a big problem with getting more people involved. Also, listing an author's other works. All the YA books, to their credit, do have a about the author page at the end, which is good. But some authors, especially the ones that have written a lot, can't fit all of their novels onto this one little section here. And so it's very difficult for you to figure out where all the author's novels are. And you could say, well, you could look at places like Goodreads or Fantastic Fiction, but to me, it should be right in the book. In the adult novels from Del Rey and Random House, they do put the author's full works, whether they're the full novels that they've written in this franchise or not. They just put all the books. Now, a couple of times they have been more limiting. For instance, with Timothy Zahn recently, he just has so many Star Wars novels that they basically said, we'll list all of your Star Wars novels at the front in the list, but we won't put all your books. And occasionally I'm like, I wish they would put all 60 of his novels, but I get it. I get that there's some spatial issues like that. But for the YA books, at minimum, you could put their other Star Wars novels if you've written them. This is a hardcover of Ahsoka, which was E.K. Johnston's first book. But she's done 5 books now, and her most recent book, Crimson Climb, does not have that list in the front. It has, information about her in the the back page, but it doesn't actually have like the list of her novels, and it doesn't have the list of her other novels, which is generally a publishing courtesy. I think Random House does a really good job of this, and I think that Tor, which I believe is Macmillan, also does a really good job of this, of putting other authors' other works, because it's a kind of a trickle-down system of if you're reading a lot of one author's works, you might read another, and you might be more encouraged to pick up more in this series, and so they want to do whatever it is that gets you more interested, and listing an author's works does that. I've been on this too long. Also, the font type in these YA books just doesn't work for me. And I'd be really curious to see if other people find that it's off-putting. The the font, and this is really difficult to quantify, but the font style just does not enrapture me. It really takes me out of the book. It feels odd for a Star Wars book, and maybe it's because I'm so used to the adult novels formatting and the font style, but the font style of the YA books, it's just really different and it just doesn't rub me the right way. So let's talk about other things that I think they should do. I think that they should work on getting better interconnectivity between the YA books. I mentioned that they're pretty much standalone. All of the YA books, with exception to the High Republic. The High Republic is the singular exception to this rule. But generally, these YA books, you read one book by one author and one book by another, and there's like no connection whatsoever. And it feels, and even from one book to another, oftentimes feels like there's no connection either. The YA books just feel like you're reading a single story about a single person, and there's no reward for having read all of the novels in the line. And in the adult novels, I feel like the authors there, and I don't know whether it's a publishing thing where the authors have chosen to do this, or whether it's the editors that have chosen this, but you don't have that kind of reward system of the connections and Easter eggs across the board with the franchise, and it doesn't feel like there's the working of the authors between each other in the same way that there is among the adult books. As I said, High Republic is excluded from this. I think the High Republic has generally done a fairly good job of this. The High Republic has other issues that I've talked about ad nauseum, but at least the High Republic does have more interconnectivity and proves that they can do it in the YA series, I think. So now talking about the final big point I have is what are the writers that they should have, they should keep, the writers that they should bring in. I have a couple of writers that I'm like, you need to keep hiring these people, keep letting them write novels. Their books are great. They're gonna keep entertaining audiences. And then there's some other people that I think could be brought in as well. And let me know who you would like to keep and bring in as well. Some of the ones that I think we need to keep, one is Beth Revis, she wrote the YA novel Rebel Rising, which was amazing and is one of the top YA novels for me. And then she also wrote the novel for the adult line, The Princess and the Scoundrel, which was also very good. And I think that Beth Revis has proven that she can write both types, and I think that she gets how to do Star Wars in YA. So she would be one of my picks to keep. Claudia Gray is the darling of the YA line of Star Wars. Her YA books, from Lost Stars to Leia Princess of Alderaan to her High Republic novel, are just super popular. And she's not my favorite, but I get it, and I actually think that she does add something that's necessary and does get Star Wars in a way some of the other authors don't, so I would for sure keep Claudia Gray. And then the third author I'll talk about keeping is Zoraida Cordova. Zoraida wrote The Crash of Fate, which I thought was a really great romance. It is the cheesiest Star Wars romance out there. And I mean, if we're talking about cheesy romances in Star Wars, there's some other cheesy ones. Boy, does this take the cake at cheesy romances. And I loved it. It was so atmospheric. It tied in well to the Galaxy's Edge, to the theme park and stuff. I loved it. And then she also wrote an adult novel, which is not my favorite of the adult line. It's probably actually one of my least favorite adult novels for the High Republic. But she, I feel, would be the type of person that gets Star Wars and also at the same time gets how to do YA books for Star Wars. So I would keep her. Now, talking about some other authors that I think would be fresh and would be great additions to the YA line. One of them, Delilah Dawson. She has written YA novels. Her novels Hit and Strike I thought were terrific. I thought she's really good at that. She has written Star Wars as well. She's written 3 adult novels and some short stories. So Delilah Dawson I think would be a terrific fit, and she kind of does a good job of I talked about how they appeal. Some of these books seem to appeal exclusively to women. I think that Delilah is the type of person that her marketing and her books naturally appeal to women, but she also is able to bring in the male audiences as well, which I think is very effective. So that is basically what I want to see happen in the Star Wars YA line. Some things I think they can fix on a cosmetic level with like the changes to the formatting. Things I think they could fix on the grander level of the plotting and the writing style, and then also the authors that are brought in. So if you have any thoughts on this, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.